In the early Middle Ages, a king rarely ruled a neat, solid block of land. He inherited a patchwork of places, each with its own strongmen and grudges. Travel stayed slow, news stayed slow, and paperwork barely existed. So power rested on guesswork. A rumour could arrive too late to matter. A rival could gather men just one valley away, and the court might not know until the danger stood at the gate. That blind spot changed how rulers used the people closest to them. Riders already carried orders, but now some rides carried questions. Household servants already moved between halls, markets, and churches, but now their eyes mattered. Kings leaned on loyalty, not training. They picked men who returned, men who kept quiet, men who belonged to the ruler's inner world. The mission shifted from delivery to discovery. Bring back what you heard. Bring back what you saw. These early information gatherers stayed simple, but the impact stayed real. They helped a ruler sense trouble before it turned into open war. They let him test allies, measure rivals, and learn which local leaders hesitated. It also tightened control at home, because a court that listened became a court that watched. No grand spy service existed yet. Still, a habit formed. Intelligence became a task, assigned on purpose and carried by trusted people on the road. As monasteries and cathedral schools spread literacy, writing stopped being rare and became useful. Letters no longer belonged only to church business. A ruler who could send orders in writing could reach farther than any rider's memory. Decisions could be repeated exactly, even weeks later. Promises, payments, and instructions could be fixed on a page. That changed power. It also changed what people fought over. Royal courts started leaning on correspondence to run long-distance rule. A king's will could travel to distant lords, border captains, and officials without the king moving at all. Written messages coordinated marriages, alliances, taxes, and troop movements. But every letter created a trail. It had to pass through hands, roads, and stopping places. The more government depended on writing, the more those routes mattered. And then the weakness became obvious. A spoken message vanished once it was delivered, but a letter could be seized, copied, and carried away. Interception turned paper into a weapon. An enemy who captured one page learned plans, names, and loyalties. A rival who read a private instruction gained leverage before a decision ever reached its target. Written coordination brought reach and control, but it also invited spying. Interception stopped being a rare mishap and started looking like a normal hazard. So courts changed how letters worked. A message no longer needed to be readable to everyone who touched it. Wax seals grew into proof of control, not decoration, because a broken seal meant a stranger had handled the paper. Writers avoided plain names, swapped titles for nicknames, and used careful wording that sounded harmless if copied. Then secrecy moved beyond hiding meaning in polite language. Courts tried ciphers, simple substitutions, rearranged alphabets, and agreed symbols, because even a captured letter could be made useless. Instructions travelled with gaps, odd spellings, or numbers that only matched a shared key. The result mattered. People started assuming their mail might be read by an enemy, and they wrote as if every courier carried risk. But coded words solved only half the problem. A letter also had to be trusted as unchanged, so countermeasures appeared. Senders added small checks, repeated phrases, matched marks, or private signs that confirmed the hand and the sequence. Any mismatch suggested tampering or a forgery. Over time, this stopped being an emergency trick and became routine practice because the court that ignored it invited disaster. Trade expanded, and so did the reach of news. Ships and caravans linked ports and market towns across Christian, Muslim, and Byzantine lands. And information moved with the people who already travelled: merchants, pilgrims, sailors. A price change in one city hinted at war in another. A missing convoy suggested a new danger at sea. Nothing had to be official to be valuable. The route itself carried the message. Rulers noticed what this meant. They no longer waited for court messengers to bring a clean report. They tapped the noise of commerce and travel. They paid for rumours before they became public. They commissioned guides who knew border crossings, local officials, and which roads stayed open in winter. They recruited men who looked harmless because they belonged there anyway. A trader could ask questions that a soldier never could. This changed the shape of spying. Informants crossed frontiers without banners, carrying facts mixed into everyday business. They listened in inns, counted ships in harbours, noted who bought grain, who hired guards, who suddenly left town. The best intelligence did not arrive sealed with wax. It arrived as a casual detail that sounded ordinary. And because it rode inside civilian life, it became harder to spot and harder to stop. Crusading armies and frontier garrisons operated where commanders did not know the roads, the rivers, or the people. Maps rarely helped. Villages could feed an army one week and warn the enemy the next. Marching blind became a gamble that ended in ambush, thirst, or a siege against the wrong target. So leaders treated information as a supply, not a luxury. They needed eyes ahead, and they needed answers fast. Scouting stopped being a casual ride and became a job with clear purpose. Small groups moved out early, counted enemy banners, judged where horses could pass, and checked which bridges still stood. Just as important, commanders leaned on local guides who knew the hidden tracks and the safe wells, even if their loyalty stayed uncertain. To manage that risk, guides got watched, cross-checked, and sometimes replaced. A route only mattered if it could be trusted. Then came the human sources inside the enemy's reach. Defectors offered camp rumours and unit strengths, but they also brought lies meant to mislead. Prisoners became another tool, questioned for names, distances, and passwords, and their claims got compared against scouts and other captives. The change was simple but decisive. Commanders built a process. Instead of heroic guesswork, they assembled fragments into usable battlefield intelligence and acted before the ground acted on them. High medieval kings no longer ruled by guesswork and personal trust alone. They tightened their grip through administration and money. They appointed officials whose job depended on movement, travelling the roads, checking accounts, inspecting local officers, and sending back what they found. That created a new kind of information stream, not a single urgent warning, but a steady flow. Power started to come with paperwork. Once these officials toured the realm, the crown started asking the same questions again and again. How much tax came in? Who withheld it? Which lord raised men? Which town argued with its bishop? Reports stopped being improvised. They followed patterns, so the king could compare one place to another, and one year to the next. Intelligence became less like gossip. It became a record that could be checked. And the most important change involved people, not ink. Kings paid agents to look and listen beyond their own households, and those agents stayed on the books. When one ruler died, the need remained, and the machinery kept turning. Files, routines, and recurring inquiries survived the personality of the monarch. Information started to outlast a reign. That meant secrets could be managed like revenue, collected, audited, and acted on. Court life became a contest fought with information. Rivals stopped waiting for open mistakes and started manufacturing them. A careless remark got repeated as a report. A private weakness became a public warning. Accusations spread in whispers because whispers sounded safe and because no one could easily prove where they began. The most dangerous secret was not a battle plan. It was anything that could change the ruler's trust. Letters turned into weapons just as easily. A forged note, a false seal, or a copied hand created proof that looked official enough to damage a reputation before anyone checked it. So did staged discoveries, a document found at the right moment, or a servant overhearing the right words. Each trick forced courtiers to act on fear, not certainty. And once suspicion took hold, denial often sounded like guilt. That pressure produced a new response: counterintelligence inside the court. Access to the ruler got tighter because influence began at the doorway. Messengers faced screening, and routes of communication narrowed to people considered safe. Suspicious courtiers got watched, not only for betrayal, but for loose talk. Leaks met punishment meant to teach a lesson to everyone else. The message was simple. Spying no longer came only from outside. Diplomacy did not pause between wars. It became a constant, and that changed what an envoy meant. A messenger no longer carried one request and rode home. He stayed, listened, and returned with far more than a formal answer. Courts sent men who could negotiate in public and observe in private, noting who gained influence, who vanished from view, and which visitors suddenly arrived from a rival power. Soon, rulers relied on resident agents who remained near a foreign court for months, even years. Their job had two tracks at once. They pushed their lord's interests forward, and they harvested clues about intentions. A marriage talk, a trade dispute, a church appointment, all hinted at future alliances. Small shifts mattered. A quiet meeting could signal a new bloc forming long before armies moved. That was the turning point. Spying stopped being a tool, pulled out only in emergencies. It settled into everyday government. Courts kept foreign contacts alive on purpose, even when peace held, because ignorance now carried a price. Information became a standing need, like revenue or troops. The goal was simple and relentless: to know what others planned and to prevent surprise by tracking friendships, feuds, and promises as they changed. Late medieval wars and succession fights did not just threaten borders, they threatened legitimacy. A single rumor about an heir, a treaty, or a betrayal could trigger revolts and invasions at once, so rulers paid for larger secret efforts, not in one town, but across whole regions. Information had to arrive faster, and it had to match. The old habit of sending one trusted man no longer covered the map. To handle that pressure, intelligence became organized like a job, not a favor. Courts kept ledgers of payments, routes, and results, so work continued even when officers changed. They built code books so different agents used the same hidden language. They also tracked reliability because a wrong report now cost armies and crowns. Secrecy still mattered, but management mattered just as much. This system created memory. The network also stretched into chains. One agent gathered a detail, another moved it safely, another checked it against other sources, and only then did it reach decision makers. That coordination let rulers run operations in several places at once, even while negotiating and fighting. It also created a new kind of risk. If one link failed, the whole chain bent. Still, the result looked like an early service, centralized, funded, and continuous. In today's reality, medieval spying got studied the only way it could, through what survived on paper. Letters remained, sometimes with seals still attached. Orders, receipts, and copied reports ended up in archives. Chroniclers recorded who betrayed whom and why. Piece by piece, these scraps proved something simple. Intelligence work did not begin with machines. It already ran on planning, discipline, and record-keeping. Those documents also showed methods, not just drama. A broken seal suggested interception. A repeated handwriting style pointed to the same clerk, the same office, the same routine. A sudden change of messenger revealed fear of leaks. Names disappeared behind nicknames and meaning hid inside careful wording. None of it required electricity, but it required systems people trusted enough to use again and again. That contrast landed hard. Chapter 1 rested on fragile word of mouth, carried by riders and servants and lost with a single mistake. Here, the trail stayed visible centuries later. Networks existed, and they left tracks. Not every secret survived, but enough did to show what these networks achieved. They influenced alliances, shaped campaigns, and steered succession fights. Medieval politics and war already turned on information.